Hey, good evening, everyone. It's 6 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and start. I know a couple of people will be joining as we get through these first couple of slides, so welcome. My name is Jill Nogaris, and I am the K-12 English Language Arts Coordinator at the Virginia Department of Education in the Office of Humanities. I am joined this evening by my middle school specialist, Colleen Cassida, and many of you, especially in this group in our grades 3 through 5 cohort, are very familiar with our elementary English and reading specialist, Carmen Curick, who is out on maternity leave currently, but worked very diligently to support this entire conference series. So the three of us, I just want to welcome you this evening. I want to give Colleen a quick chance to hop on and say hello.
Hi, everybody. I am so glad to kick off tonight, and we look forward to sharing all of our wonderful presenters with you.
Yes, thank you. All right, so without further ado, we are going to hop right into things. I just want to say, though, I have a separate screen up watching the YouTube over here, and I just love how committed this group is. You're already networking, welcoming one another, shouting out where you're from, and that is awesome. So thank you for interacting. We will certainly be monitoring the chat and trying to handle questions as we can this evening. So first thing, just a welcome. It is 6 o'clock at night on Wednesday, and you are here with us during the dinner hour, during your family time, during when you could be sleeping, some of you grading papers, whatever the case may be. So we just want to say welcome and thank you for being here, because we know this was optional and we really truly support you and appreciate your commitment to education, to learning, and to just bettering your craft for the students in your classrooms. But really, we couldn't even start tonight without recognizing just how phenomenal you all are. This has been quite the past 18 months, and I don't think anybody stopped reeling from just everything that's gone on. And the fact that you are here on a Wednesday night and a Thursday night, and for some of you, you've already spent 2 evenings with us, we just think that you are amazing. Obviously, this is in place of the professional development that we would typically hold in person, and many of you have joined us for our SOL Institutes or deeper learning conferences, where we would get together for an entire day and just rally around best practices and network with one another and just get really excited about teaching, because we're all here because we're passionate about it. And unfortunately, we can't be together right now, so we try to offer the next best thing. But still wanting to offer you at least 6 hours that full day, we decided to break it up into 2 evening sessions. So I want to make sure that we highlight what our sessions look like for the next 2 nights so that you have an understanding. I know this information was in your note before you go, but we will be hosting a general session, which you're sitting in right now, where we're going to kind of go over some best practices and just some updates from the Virginia Department of Education. And then at 7 o'clock, we are going to highlight 2 of our educator friends from Virginia Beach, who will be presenting on teaching with urgency, getting the max out of instruction, and thinking about moving forward in the 21-22 school year, and what can we do to truly support students and get them ready and back in gear. And then at 8 o'clock, 2 of our friends from Carroll County, who actually started school today with students. So for those of us who feel exhausted, our 8 o'clock session is actually going to be run by teachers who taught all day. So this is phenomenal. And they're going to be speaking on the power of annotating, a strategy for better comprehension, and what that can look like in grades 3 through 5. What you'll notice when you see our schedule for tomorrow is that this is not a repeat. We are not repeating these sessions tomorrow. We have 3 additional sessions for you all so that you could get a complete workshop out of this. We'll be looking at integrating interdisciplinary content into everyday literacy experiences, developing thinking in upper elementary grades, combining the persuasive mode of writing with iterative reading, research, and discussion, and then engaging all learners in text and how to scaffold grade level text, because we know that that is important for our students. So we have a full plate, and we are going to try to stick with this schedule. For those of you who are with us, we will be posting recordings of the presentations and the presentation materials, but that won't happen until the end of the complete conference series. So the bonus for you all being live with us this evening is that you can access the material right now using either the QR code you see on the screen or the bit.ly that's posted. And I believe it is also tagged over in YouTube from Eric Sawyer and how to get to tonight's resources. It will also have last night's resources and the night before that. So it's definitely a folder that you want, and it contains a lot of extra additional information that really is bonus material, like bonus tracks on a CD for being here live. So make sure that you check that out. Make sure that you pin this, look at it pin it on your computer, whatever you need to do so that you can access the materials, because I know several of our presenters will refer to things, and that way you can go into that Google folder and pull the materials yourselves. So that is there for you. I want to take just a quick moment to let you know what this session is going to cover. We're going to talk about this year's goals for teaching literacy and what does that mean in 21-22. So talking about addressing literacy instruction using a comprehensive approach. If you have spent any time on the Virginia Department of Education website in the last couple of years, you will see that we've really been targeting this idea of a comprehensive approach to literacy, an integrated approach where we look at reading and writing and research and communication together and how that they work together to better comprehension for our students. Additionally, as a bonus for this group, which is pretty awesome, we're going to be talking about the new growth measures and how those growth measures can serve as a tool for you all to support teaching and learning with your students. And we actually, as an extra bonus, have our colleagues from the Office of Student Assessment with us tonight. We have our Assistant Superintendent of Student Assessment, ESA Programs, with us, Shelley Lovingrider, and our Director of Assessment, Sarah Susbury. So they will walk you through what we talk about when we mean growth assessments, what you hear about it, and just try to clarify some of that for you all, as you know that those are targeted in grades 3 through 8. So we wanted to make sure that we address that tonight for you all. And then after that, you know, they're such a phenomenal tool, but what next? So then we will talk about focusing on essential skills in everyday instruction to address unfinished learning as we think about where our students are and just the wide variety of experiences that they are bringing to our classrooms this fall. Some of them never missed a beat. Some of them missed a lot of instruction. Some of them need additional support, and we already had such a range of readers in our classrooms before school shut down. Where are we now, and what can we do? So we're going to examine some of that and provide you with some tools and supports to kind of help you kick off your year and get kids going, and then just finish out with some resources and guidance that we have available. We know that our site is truly large and cumbersome and difficult to manage. So we're going to highlight and point out for you where you can get these materials. Okay, so to kick it off, we want to talk about comprehensive literacy. Literacy means so much more than just reading. It's that reading, writing, communicating, speaking, all of that. And where we look at texts, our idea and definition of text has changed so much as well. Text does not just mean a book anymore. Text is looking at visual literacy, our auditory literacy, and looking at different pieces and components and how our brain puts them all together to understand. So when we talk about comprehensive literacy, we like to talk in the English office about the thematic unit approach. And we talk about this because it's such a great way to engage students and for them to see how pieces connect together and how different texts work together to engage students and get them thinking. So we definitely advocate for a more thematic approach, so that we don't just have a writing unit or a reading unit and we're only going to read short stories. No, instead, possibly we could look at a short story as an anchor text that we're really connected to, that we want to use for a purpose of teaching the elements of a short story, but maybe that short story explores some other current events or issues that we want to pull in, possibly a newspaper article, or we want to go research something. So we want to have students grapple with text and think about how they can connect text to other things. So this definitely allows for us to bring in more relevant topics that interest our students, and they can be relevant to your community. We have so much history in Virginia. We have complete sites where you can find out different events that happened within your county and use that as a starting place, and then kind of branch out from there and figure out what event happened, what did that lead to, and what text can I pull in that makes it a little bit more relevant to your students. So you can think about bringing in different points of view or different conversations or different perspectives on a topic. And you can do that through a thematic approach, because if you're talking about an essential question, you know, there might be different answers to an essential question, which would allow us to bring in different sources. But when we do this thematic approach, it also allows us to have more student choice and to integrate our 4 strands together and to focus on those skills that students really need and to spiral in some of that knowledge. It also allows us to pour into our students a lot of background knowledge and information that will scaffold that comprehension for them moving forward, and certainly allows us to bring in Virginia's 5 C's. When we talk about using a variety of texts, that could mean literally a variety of books, short stories, plays, novels, poems, articles, when we talk about a variety of text. But as we contemplate what the 21-22 school year looks like, and we think about the different learning experiences that our students have had and how we have a sense of urgency to really rally around our students and, you know, get them where they need to be so that they can move forward in their learning. I know that a lot of schools are exploring the idea of really focusing on, say, literacy and math. And while obviously as the English coordinator, I love this focus on literacy, but I'm going to caution you about how we devote that time in our literacy block and what kinds of pieces of text that we use. I will always advocate that we need to use this time to bring in our content area learning. So thinking about Virginia studies and thinking about 5th grade science, when we talk about force and matter and energy, all of that is so important. And those are pieces of text that we want to work with, events that happen in Virginia studies, different primary sources, things that we can look at and explore that we can help students deepen their literacy skills with, but still bring in that content area. You know, we talk about in K2, we learn to read so that we can read to learn. Well, what are we trying to learn? This is where our content areas come in, and this is where we need to teach them how to understand those content areas and how to address and understand text in those content areas. And this and all of our students in that 3rd, 4th grade area. So we have an opportunity here to highlight that and use it as a tool. So we don't want to think about just abandoning or pushing aside our history and our science to 30 minutes in the 2nd semester. No, we really want to highlight how we can use that as part of our literacy block and really scaffold that understanding for our students. We also want to think about how it is through our text that we provide common understanding and that background knowledge that not all students in our class may have. So we have an opportunity here to scaffold that understanding that will help our students in future years. Especially if we think about the content in Virginia studies and in science, that all scaffolds that foundational knowledge that will help our students in preparation for middle school classes. And it will also introduce them to that content area literacy and give them the strategies that they need, that they will start using as they head into upper elementary and into middle school. So that foundational knowledge is super important. And we have such an opportunity that I don't want any of us to miss it. It also allows us to explore different people, cultures, and traditions than what's in our own neighborhood. So just kind of keeping that in mind. We also advocate for student-driven research, which allows our students to explore topics. Maybe it's within that current event we're looking at, or that Virginia Studies event that happened, or a science experiment that's gone on. And it allows that natural curiosity to continue within a kid. We want them to ask questions. We want them to go looking for answers. So how do we get students involved in the research process? We want them to see it as part of the learning process and not just an event or a task or something that they have to do separately. So if we do this frequently and have it as an ongoing part of our classrooms, then students see this as a part of the learning process and will continue with it. And we also want to talk about self-expression through communication and writing. We have the opportunity for our students to talk and write about what they've read, what they've heard, what they've researched, what they've discussed. And they can do this before, during, and after reading. So these things should be happening together. But it's just as important for us to model our own thinking and our writing, because our students can't just look at a published piece of writing and just go do it. They need to muddle through the process with us. They need to hear us modeling our thinking and the hard work of writing and reflecting, and that, we can always get better. So they need to see that feedback, and they need to see that we write for a variety of different purposes, that we don't always just write to the teacher, that it isn't always a 5-paragraph essay, but that we write for many different reasons, and that we explore and advocate, or we ask questions, or we interview, whatever the case may be, that they see this as part of a process that they want to be engaged in. So before we move over to the second portion of our evening and talk about assessment updates, I just want you to take a minute to kind of look at this scale. And I think it's really important, because I think it really talks about what we're trying to do when we talk about comprehensive literacy. For many years, we've talked about students needing to read grade level texts, and that they need to see distinguished writing, and that everything must be rigorous, and that we've got to hit the standards of learning, and we must include the 5 C's. And that is 100% true. All of that is true. However, on the other side of our scale, we have things that are more about student interests and student choice, and that we are working on foundational skills that might have been missed. And we talk about using books that students love. And sometimes when we do that, our students don't challenge themselves, because they know what they love, they know what they can read, and they're really happy here, but then they don't get any better. So basically, we can't have any side of this balance here without having the other. So if we want our students to be successful and go forward in their literacy development and be lovers of language and learning and literacy, we need to have components from both sides of this. We can't just throw rigorous grade level text if we haven't scaffolded in some of that missed learning, or just supports that students need who may not be reading grade level text. But at the same time, we've got to make sure that we are handling both, that we are engaging our students, and that we're interesting them in reading because we've picked topics that are relevant to them, but that they can handle something a little bit more rigorous and challenging because they are engaged and interested, and we have provided those scaffolds. So it really is a balancing act, and that's something that we talk a lot about in English language arts. We can't just solely be about what kids just 100% want to read all the time. Because then they'll never look at a primary source, many of them. But at the same time, if we only look at primary source documents, then we're not engaging our students in learning. So just trying to think about a comprehensive approach as trying to balance both sides of these scales. And yes, you could substitute different things or switch sides, but just kind of to give you something to think about as you're thinking about literacy and your school year. So what I'm going to do now is I am going to mute myself, but we are going to look at some updates from the Office of Student Assessment, and they're going to talk to us about the fall growth assessments that are coming up for 21 22. And for those of you who are already in school, you're probably close to participating in these. So I will mute myself here. Shelley, you can let me know when you'd like me to switch slides.
All right. Good evening, everyone. It's great to be with you all. One of the benefits of the pandemic has been that we have been able to interact more directly with teachers over the past year and a half. We really appreciate Jill and Colleen and Carmen giving us an opportunity tonight to talk with you a bit about some new assessments that will be coming on board in the 2021-2022 school year. And on the next slide, we can see that these growth assessments are actually mandated through legislation. So we had legislation in the 2021 session that requires these new assessments. They are called through year or growth assessments, and they're required in grades 3 through 8 in reading and math. These are not SOL tests. They are intended instead to really look at growth across the year. And as we'll talk about a bit more in a minute, also to help you identify areas where students may need additional support throughout this year. We're going to talk mostly tonight about 2021-2022 because that, of course, is the assessment that is upon us. But this legislation is being phased in. So for this year, the legislation calls for the administration of a fall assessment in grades 3 through 8 reading and math. And then, of course, we will administer the usual SOL test in the spring. And those assessments will be used to measure growth. Full implementation of the legislation will occur in the 22-23 school year. And in that year, we will add an additional assessment. So then we'll have a fall growth assessment, a winter growth assessment, and then the normally occurring spring SOL test. So Jill, if you'll go to the next slide, we'll talk a bit about this year. So even though these are not SOL tests, we want to make sure that as you use the results to identify where students may need additional support, and we also use them to measure growth, we wanted to make sure that the items used on these tests did measure Virginia standards of learning. So what we have done is we have created much shorter computer adaptive tests, and they do use existing test items. Now for this year only, so fall 2021 only, those assessments will be administered to students, and they'll be on the previous year's content. So it will occur, it will be based on the content that the student would have learned the year before. So essentially a grade 4 student in the fall will take an assessment that is based on content that student would have been taught in the 3rd grade. Yeah, I know, of course, the question is, so what happens with 3rd grade students? Because there is no SOL test that measures the previous year's content. Those students will take 3rd grade test items, but department staff have worked carefully to ensure that the items on that 3rd grade fall test really measures content that is typically taught in the 2nd grade. So just to reiterate, the tests are going to be shorter. There will be computer adaptive for most students. They will be based on content that would have been learned in the previous year. So content the students would have been taught in 2020, 2021. If we can go to the next slide now, Jill. So most students will take the computer adaptive tests. And I know one question is, so you said they're shorter, but how much shorter? So the test blueprints, the SOL test blueprints have been reduced proportionally to develop the online growth assessment. So the reading test will range between 17 to 19 items, and the math test will have between 20 and 25. So if you're familiar with the length of the SOL test, these are about half the length of a normal SOL test. While most students will take the online computer adaptive test, we are aware that there are some students who need a paper test. That might include students who need a Braille or a large print test. And for fall of 2021, those tests will be the full-length SOL tests from the previous year. So they will be the full-length tests from the previous year for those students. Again, that is a very small number of students. The majority of students will take the online tests that are much shorter. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the normally occurring SOL CAT assessments in the spring will serve as the measure of growth, and also the summative assessment that we use for accountability, both for accreditation and also for federal accountability. So we've talked quite a bit about what the tests look like. Let's talk a little bit about the purpose. Now, we are certainly aware that testing can be very anxiety producing, both for students and also for teachers. So we are trying to make sure that we send a different message about these particular assessments. So this is just an example of information we've put in the manuals that go with these tests that could be used with students. Tests will have no pass-fail. So students can be told that clearly. And really the idea is that the test will help you as a teacher know what the student may need additional support for in this coming year. Again, we know that last year was an interrupted school year for many students. And so the hope is that these assessments will help to identify that concept of unfinished learning so that you can support students in accelerating this year and getting back on track. So students will be told no pass fail, do the best you can, and just go on if you don't know the answer. And there is additional information about the purpose of the test for students, but I wanted you all to be aware that we are cognizant of the fact that this can be anxiety producing for students. So we try to include a clear message that you could provide to them. All right, Joe, you can go on to the next slide. And I know that for you all, the primary purpose of these assessments will be to look at the information you'll get and help to determine what students need additional help with this year. And we can provide more information at a later time about the information you will get, but it will be information based on the items that the student took. So specific information about the items that the student received on these assessments so that you can identify where they might need additional help based on what they were taught last year. But these assessments will also be used to measure growth for accreditation. And so I wanted to give you a bit of an idea of how that worked. And the next slide just reminds us of how accreditation is used, how growth is used in accreditation. And as a reminder, we use what's called the combined rate for accreditation. And if we look at our 10 fictional students at the top of the screen, you'll notice that we had 6 students who passed and 4 students who didn't. But of those 4, we had 1 student who didn't pass the reading test, but did show growth. So that student provides credit to the school and accreditation just as though he or she had passed. And additionally, if there is a student who's an English learner who doesn't pass the test and doesn't show growth on the SOL test, then if that student shows progress in learning English, that student is also counted. So the use of growth and accreditation is important because it really acknowledges the work you all do to move students towards a proficiency, even if they don't pass the test. So let's talk a little bit about how this works with the growth assessments on the next slide. So for 2021, 2022, we'll look at the spring 22 SOL scores. And for those of you who are familiar with how we have measured growth in the past, we would have compared those scores against the scores for the student in spring of 21. This year, we are also going to look at the spring 22 SOL scores against the fall 2021 growth assessments. And whichever comparison shows the greater growth is what we'll use for accreditation. So we'll use the old way of measuring growth, but in addition, we'll also look at the fall assessments. And if the students show growth from fall to spring, we would also use that. Beyond this year, so in 2023 and 2022, 2023, we of course will have that new winter assessment. And so we have not yet determined exactly how we will measure growth. We will have to, we'll certainly provide more information to you as we get closer to 2022, 2023. Okay. All right, so let's look ahead to 2022-23. We've talked a lot about 21-22. As I noted earlier, the full implementation will occur in this year, and that means that we will have 2 growth assessments, one in the fall and one in the winter. And then, of course, we'll have the normally occurring spring SOL test. And we'll look a bit more about how this will work in the next slide. So while in this year, 2021-2022, we know that the content of the assessments will be based on the previous year's content. In 2022-23, it will be based on the content that the student is learning that year. So the 4th grader we talked about before would receive a test that's based on 4th grade content. But the computer adaptive algorithm will be modified so that it will choose off-grade items as needed. So if there is a student who's having difficulty with the 4th grade content, the algorithm will pick up a 3rd grade item. And then while this year in 2021, 2022, we're having to administer those full-length paper assessments, we will have shorter paper tests for students who need those in the coming year. I know that was a lot of information, and again, Jill, we appreciate the opportunity to share a bit about the assessments. You know, we're certainly hoping that they will be useful to you all, just to give you an idea of where students are in terms of the content they were taught last year. But we fully realize that this will only give you an idea of where you need to look in terms of supporting students. And we certainly encourage you to use all of the other resources that Jill and others have provided you to support students in really with that unfinished learning from last year. So I know Sarah is having trouble with thunderstorms at her house, as I am at my house. So are there any questions that we need to answer at this point?
Hi, Shelley. We do have one question related to whether the growth assessments will follow the same procedures for administration as the SOL tests do. Do you want to talk about that?
Sure. So similar to sending a different message to students about these tests, we also have modified the administration procedures a bit. Now, these are still secure test items, so there will be some rules around the administration. But for example, we will allow the teacher of record to administer the test to students. And we're trying to relax the administration rules as much as possible while still maintaining that test security. Sarah, if you have other content you want to add, go ahead.
No, that's terrific, Shelley. Thanks. And then another question came in about, will schools receive data from the growth assessments?
Yes, you will receive results from these assessments, and we are working on a way in which teachers can have more ready access to the data, and we will get more information to you as we finalize those plans. But yes, schools will get information, and we're trying to make sure that teachers have more ready access.
Okay, and then there's another question, Shelley, about the level of the text of these assessments. should they assume that the level of the text on these reading passages corresponds with the previous school year? Or is it more of a second grade text, for example, for those third grade students, or will it be more of a third grade level text that those students will see this fall?
So the passages and the items have been chosen based on the previous year's content. So generally, if it's a fall fourth grader, the text that that student would receive would have been appropriate for a third grader. And does that help? Or Sarah, do you think? Okay.
Yeah, I think that helps, Shelley. And then there was a question about whether we'll be providing a Lexile text level for these assessments or for the SOL tests.
No, at this point, we will not be providing Lexiles. So there will be a vertical scale score provided that we can get more information to you later, but no Lexile at this point.
Okay, and I don't see any other questions at this point, Shelley, so thanks. And thanks
Okay.
everyone for popping in with these questions.
Okay, thank you all very much for your attention, and hopefully we'll be able to provide more information to you at a different time if Jill, I'm sure Jill will let us do that. Thank you, Jill.
Absolutely. Thank you, ladies, for joining us this evening. And again, I'm seeing in the chat all sorts of thunderstorms everywhere, so I'm glad everybody stayed on. Thank you. We appreciate your time. And again, if we have any additional questions, we will make sure to field them your way.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jill.
Okay, so moving into, now that we know that we're talking about growth assessments and that we're going to have these measures to kind of help us and show us where our students are, especially as they move into new grade levels and with different experiences, we want to think about where do we go next? What are the essential skills that we need to think about for 21-22, and what instructional practices do we want to examine? So just wanted to share a few of the pieces that we have on the Virginia Department of Education site to kind of support this work. Oftentimes we like to cite this Ed Week article here on what's the best way to address unfinished learning. It's not remediation, study says. So taking our fourth graders and spending the first half of the school year on third grade content is not actually going to support our students. It's just going to keep them further and further behind because they've now missed a half of year of fourth grade content. So thinking about instead where we have opportunities to scaffold in skills and unfinished learning is really the way to kind of move forward with our content. And we are very fortunate as a K-12 skills-based course that we invite and see the same skills over and over again and invite kids to just dig deeper every year. So it provides us an opportunity to say, hey, we didn't cover this last year, but we're going to dig in now and we're going to take it as far as we can. So when we think about what we want our K-12 instructional practices to look like, this is what we want to see for our students and what our teachers are doing, our instructional practices for our students. And while I'm not going to sit here and read this entire piece to you, you will have access to it, one in this presentation, but two also on our Virginia Learns website. So just kind of thinking about what we would want to see for our students. We want them to have opportunities for shared and independent reading. We want to make sure that our vocabulary is specific and comes from authentic text, not just random words on a wall. We want them to make connections between the intent of the author and the content of the text, and to start thinking about why authors do what they do. Start thinking about that craft, thinking about engaging in writing as a recursive process and providing feedback through conferencing and in writing to our students. So just kind of thinking about how we can approach instruction in the 21-22 school year that will allow for these best instructional practices, but really hone in on what our students need. And if you look at this, this is all done in grade bands. What you see here is grades 3 through 5. One, because you are the grade 3 through 5 audience, but also because no matter what grade level we teach, we probably have students who fit in this grade band sitting in our classrooms this year. So if we had to think about the essentials of what we want our students to learn and be able to do, if you had to take the standards of learning for grades 3, 4, and 5 and try to narrow them down, one, it would be impossible, but two, you would hone in on these bullets right here. But as you can see, one bullet really covers an A, B, D, and J of a standard. So we didn't really get rid of anything, but we really tried to make it a more cohesive bullet about what we want our students to be able to do. So understanding that authors craft and structure their writing to convey meaning. That is so much bigger than just, 4.5A. That actually takes several of our standards and puts them together. But that is something we want our students to be able to do. The essentials of instruction here and understanding. Thinking about understanding that authors craft and structure their writing to convey meaning, that it's intentional, that we don't write accidentally, that everything is there for a reason. And then we start to examine word choice and vocabulary and get into that figurative language, and it all comes together. So just thinking about what we want the essentials of our instruction to look like for our grades 3 through 5, this is kind of what you'll see. All of this material is in our Virginia Learns Anywhere site under addressing unfinished learning. And what you'll see if you were to go to that site, you'll see that we have the language arts essentials posted for grades K2, 3, 5, 6, 8, and 9, 12. So for some of my 5th grade teacher friends here, I might also look at that grade 6 through 8, because you will have some students in 5th grade this year who have gone beyond the scope of 5th grade. So where can you push them? Where might you scaffold? And where can we kind of move them along their literacy journey? So just to give you some screenshots so that when you do go to our massive site and you go looking for this, you'll know you found it. You'll see here kind of like a cover page that kind of walks through language arts instruction and what we would want to see for students. And then if you were to go to the grades 3 through 5 section, you would see that we have broken it down by strand, and they are color coded intentionally. If you see that top one is communication and multimodal literacies, what you'll see, apparently this is the VDOE Language Arts Garage. We were thinking bubbles, we went with tires apparently. And what you see here is that those are the bullets, the essentials that what we want our students to be able to do with communication and multimodal literacies. But what you will see in those tires or bubbles around that are color coded, they align with the other standards and strands of English language arts, because we can't do one without the other. So each of these pictures will show you how to embed and bring in something from one of the other strands to the strand that we're highlighting here. So just once again, advocating that we really want to put these things together, and that really we're helping and supporting our students when they can see that these things work together, that they're not done in silos, and that actually their understanding of one impacts their understanding of the other. So all of that material is found in the Virginia Learns Anywhere Language Arts Essentials, which you will have linked here as well. Additionally, we have as a tool, and this would mostly work most definitely with at the building level, most likely in a grade level at a PLC or something like that. But you could, depending on how large your school division is or how many feeder patterns you have, you could expand this a little bit more. But what you see here is an updated unfinished learning log. And so the screenshot that's here, just as a sample, because we have these for every grade level, is just showing you the 4th grade standards of learning, specifically reading. And there is a section where you can write down whether or not it was sufficiently addressed in 2020, 2021. Or maybe you didn't get to it, it wasn't covered, or I didn't touch it at all. Like I sort of did, or I didn't touch it at all. And so what we would hope is that teachers and PLCs could kind of look through and say, I feel really confident that my students got this. Like maybe we were only in person March through May, but in that time, I feel good that this happened for my students, and kind of check that they feel good about that. And to say, you know what, we were virtual and this standard, it just didn't happen for us. and to check that. All right. And then what you see in that last column is where that same standard of learning comes up again in the next grade level. So if you were to share this log with a 5th grade teacher, they would have a true understanding of where those students are coming from and where they may need to scaffold in some understanding. So if they see that something wasn't addressed at all, so our students never learned how to identify something, well, clearly we are not ready to analyze. So I now know that when I want to get to this part where I'm analyzing, I need to do both. I need to scaffold that for my students so that we can keep it moving. I don't want to leave it just at identify though, because then I'm not teaching grade level standards. So where am I going to have to beef up some of my instruction, and where can I feel confident that kids are ready and we can keep going? So this is just a tool that you can use. Like I said, it's on our page and you can download those. They're just Word documents, and you can use them to have PLC meetings, to talk as grade level teams, to talk within your school, just to kind of give a common understanding of where we're starting the school year. Okay, and then just want to follow up in our last 10 minutes with some DOE supports and resources. In addition to the resources that we created kind of as we were more in a shutdown mode, and we were trying our best to support you all when you were struggling with learning how to adapt everything online, and how can we support kids and help kids, and they're just getting devices, and who has devices, I don't know. We tried to support some of that because we know a lot of you have amazing classroom libraries, but those classroom libraries were in your classroom and unavailable to students. Totally understandable. So we dedicated an entire web page to learning in place resources. And what we've done here is, if you were to go to that page, you would see that we have it by grade band. And what we've listed are different free sites where you can pull materials, digital picture books, read alouds, student-friendly search engines, online lessons, whatever the case may be, literacy activities. And what you see here is that they're listed by the site with a little description, and then it lets you know what strand of the language and listen to me, language arts, English language arts standards are covered by that site, so that you could use it as a tool. And we're leaving that site posted because we think it will be beneficial for the 21-22 school year, as teachers are looking for resources that they can send home for extra support, or for possibly tutoring, or just to use in their classrooms as they think about how they can encourage some additional learning this year. So we have those posted. And again, we have a whole section on K2 and then 6-8 that you might want to check out as well. Additionally, we have our Virginia Department of Education English Comprehensive Instructional Plans, which is a site that features over 100 instructional plans, K-12. And we have a screenshot here and a QR code if you want to go straight to that page, that will show you instructional plans by strand and grade level band that support the 2017 English Standards of Learning. So as you can see, they kind of give you a topic here, looking at retelling, bridging to summarizing. So that sweet spot between 2nd and 3rd grade, where we need to move from just being able to retell a story into the skill of summarizing, and what that might look like in an instructional plan. And all of these plans are written by Virginia educators. Some of them are probably on with us tonight. So thank you for your resources and working with us to provide these. But they are not meant to be something where you just have to pick it up and use all of it. It's there as a support. It's there to provide access, just to some kind of confidence booster, to be like, yes, this is exactly how I do it in my classroom, or, oh, cool, that's a really great idea. I never thought about doing that. And we do tie in some texts, but you are never required to use the text that we list there. In fact, we are limited by what is free and available to teachers. So you might take one of these instructional plans and really like the practices and the strategies that are used, but you might have a text that works better in your community and with your students that you just really love. So if you want to modify any of these for your use, please consider doing so. Just to kind of review some of the key features of those plans, what you're going to see is that they are all listed by a primary strand. All right. And then we're also going to talk about an integrated strand, because in all reality, we want that comprehensive integrated approach to English language arts. So I don't know about you, but if you've ever worked in a school where your administrator wants you to write down your SOLs on the board that you're covering that day, most English and reading teachers could write down 17 of them and not be lying. You probably are going to ask questions. You're going to ask kids to find details. You're going to talk about text structure. You're going to get things going, because it's a comprehensive approach. Is we're looking at the passage that's in front of us. But we always have a plan, and we always have something that we're focusing on. So that's our primary strand and our primary SOL. And then we have all these other standards that help us reinforce and scaffold that understanding. So that's what you see here. And so each plan walks you through the essential understandings and knowledge, skills, and processes that we want students to have if they are performing at grade level on this skill. And then it shows you, and again, they're written in grade bands, so you'll see multiple standards of learning addressed. And then we also have a section that gives us academic background language. So when we talk about academic background, we might bring in some scaffolding and understanding that we want our students to have that they may not know, but we also might be explaining some academic language that would support our ELL students in the classroom. So there's a whole section kind of dedicated to that to support our students. And then of course, any of the materials that are necessary are also listed. Then there is a whole section dedicated to what students and teachers are doing during this instructional plan. What do you want to see your students doing, and what would your teachers be doing? And again, none of these plans you have to go through, because especially as you get into the upper grades, some of them might take 2 weeks to do. They're very comprehensive. But this is just to give you some ideas to show you what this instruction would look like if we were hitting grade level standards. It also always includes diagnostic, formative, and summative assessment that you can use in the plan. And then if it's a reading plan, then it'll talk about writing connections. If it's a writing plan, it might talk about research or communication connections and how you can take it a step further for students who are ready, but then also how you could differentiate for students who need that as well. So we highly encourage you to check those out. And then each of tonight's presenters and tomorrow night's presenters have also written brand new instructional plans that are tied to what they're talking about this evening, that are in your folder now and will eventually be posted on the DOE SOL conference site. Additionally, in collaboration with our student assessment office, the English office and student assessment paired up this past fall to offer a webinar series about instruction leading up to assessment. So I just want to call your attention to that. I know many of you have seen it. Again, we have the QR code that will take you right there, but we have an overview that kind of talks about the entire series and where you'll find different standards of learning covered and addressed throughout the series. But then we have them each, as you can see, grade 3, grade 4, and grade 5 listed right there. So if you would like some materials to look at how to instruct for some of these, how to get at questions that aim at different standards of learning, and think about how we went through this process, you can find that material there. Also, and I know I'm almost out of time, but I want to let you know that we have a whole page dedicated to professional development on demand. Kind of like you're doing PD and your PJs right now. This is another opportunity where you can search by topic. And right now, I think we have 20 topics posted where we have completed webinars or had presentations or supports that we just wanted to highlight to make them easier to find. So we have, for instance, one on virtual and hybrid learning. So there'll be the webinar there, and then a couple of PDFs and a plan that could support you. And what we are encouraging is that maybe PLCs or school faculties could kind of take a look at this material, and then possibly maybe you look at one of these instead of a faculty meeting one day. And maybe since your principal is there and saw you guys looking at it and talking about it, maybe they would opt to use that as a potential opportunity at a local division decision, of course, to determine whether or not it could be used for recertification points. But we have many of these resources posted, and I would definitely check them out if you get a chance. Additionally, we have a whole page dedicated to our comprehensive literacy webinar series. I believe we have 25 webinars posted that we have we started these 2 months before school shut down last year. So they're all pretty new still. And we had another entire series posted. So if you are interested, we have a lot of resources because we want to help you. We know we're not just hiding up in a tower somewhere. We're trying to support in any way that we can. So we've included all of these resources, including the PowerPoints and the slides, so that if you want to use them in your division, you can as well. And then to wrap this up, I just want to let you know of 2 conferences happening. The Virginia Association of Teachers of English is hosting an annual conference in person this year. On October 8th and 9th in Charlottesville. So this is our state affiliate of our national council. And so I just want you to know that information is included and you can register for their conference. And then you are probably most familiar with this group, the Virginia State Literacy Association, formerly known as VSRA, is hosting and planning an annual conference in March in Crystal City, Virginia. And I would be remiss if I did not talk to you about Teacher Direct. This is a newsletter that is specifically geared towards teachers. If you subscribe, you will get a notification from us just once on Wednesdays, and it'll be a collection of anything you could ever want to know, whether that's grant opportunities, professional development, scholarships, competitions, you name it. For all of your content areas, that information is there. And last but not least, I cannot let this evening go by without telling you about our inaugural Family Literacy Night that we are hosting August 31st online, just like this, from 6 to 9 p.m. And actually, we want you to come, that would be great, but this is actually geared towards families. So as you're having back to school night, or you're just kind of sharing and you're sharing resources with parents, consider adding this to your queue. We have collaborated with several other offices within the Department of Education to offer this for teachers. We're going to be looking at how to help students with homework. We're going to be looking at how to read SOL reports. We're going to look at special education, family engagement, community engagement, all of that. We have so much going on that evening. So we've been highlighting this on Twitter and on DOE Facebook, but if you're interested, we have a whole web page dedicated to this as well. And as I am now over my time, I'm going to quickly thank you all for your attention. And I'm going to share that we answer our own phones and our own emails. So please feel free to reach out to us at any time. We love to hear from you. You are why we do what we do. So please, please, please do not hesitate. We want to support you. This is our information. This is the hashtag that we use as we are connecting on social media. So if you are into that, feel free. Commit to Lit VA. We're pretty excited about it.